Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Tennessee State Representative Justin J. Pearson with us today. We'll chat with him in just a moment, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, Representative Justin J. Pearson represents Tennessee House District 86, and he is now running for Congress in the state's Ninth Congressional District. He rose to national prominence as part of the Tennessee Three, standing up for gun reform and being reelected after expulsion. A lifelong organizer, he helped lead the victorious Byhalia Pipeline fight, shut down a cancer-causing sterilization plant, and now challenges Elon Musk's XAI data center. The second youngest state legislator, he is a national voice for justice, honored with the Truman Center's 2024 Moral Courage Award. Representative Pearson, welcome into the back room.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Very excited to chat with you. A lot to go over. So let's start with your state's redistricting. The U.S. Supreme Court on April 29th put what a lot of people feel is the final nail in the Voting Rights Act. And a week later, your state's Republican-controlled legislature passed a new redistricting map, which split the Ninth District into three separate districts. This is the district you're running in now, and it was the state's lone majority black district. We're talking about Shelby County, Memphis. We know what the legislature did, but what's the real impact of this new map?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be honest about what's happening in Tennessee and across the South. It's the rising of a neo-Confederacy that is not trying to separate from the Union, but within the country itself is taking over institutions for political power, dominance, control, and also to be able to use and manipulate the levers of power for their own benefit, wealth creation, and the like. And this institutionalization of white supremacy is what has led to the stripping away of the only black majority district in the state of Tennessee. Now, the consequences aren't just political. Our community's ability to be able to choose a representative of our own choosing has been taken away. And I've been running in this district since October. And to have people who have been knocking their doors and calling them, call me and say they took me from you, it's painful for a lot of folks.
Yeah, well, voters are supposed to be able to choose their candidates, not the other way around, right?
That's the way it's supposed to be. But what you have is an entire political party and apparatus that instead of changing their perspectives, their viewpoints, their policy positions to be more popular, which is what people should expect from elected officials who want to earn their vote, they have to rig the system and cheat to steal an election on behalf of the President of the United States. Because they are so unpopular, because their decisions are hurting everyday working people, black people in particular. And so instead of them changing their positions and policies, they're instead changing the maps just so that they can give themselves an advantage.
So you are running for Congress in the middle of this upheaval. You mentioned, campaigning. What are you hearing from voters on the ground? I would imagine, obviously, they're angry, they're confused about where they're going to vote. I'm sure that's a big consideration. Are you getting a lot of feelings that this map and the process is undermining democracy itself? I mean, we always have a problem with getting people to the polls, making them feel like their votes matter. Are you sensing that people are just throwing their hands up in the air and saying, what's the point?
No, I think that was the goal that they had, that people would become so apathetic, they would become so frustrated that they would not engage or participate. I think they were banking on their disinformation and dilution of black political power to actually tamp down on people's willingness to participate in democracy and thus allow them an easy pathway toward what they deemed as success. But that's not what I'm finding. We have traveled all 15 counties. 200 miles is now the size of our district. We went from 1.5 counties to 15 of them, from some of the most urban areas in Memphis and Shelby County to rural places in Savannah, Tennessee, and Giles County up into Williamson outside of Nashville. It's a huge district, but the issues that people have are actually shared. And what this experience has shown me is the systems that are hurting people in Memphis and in Boxtown and Westwood are the same ones that are hurting people in Sumner, Tennessee, and Murray County as well. Every county I've went to, people have said housing is one of their most significant problems. The affordability, private equity firms buying up neighborhoods, property taxes going up higher than people's income, and for people who are on fixed income, making it impossible for seniors to be able to stay in their homes. The reality is our struggles are shared because the same billionaires and billion-dollar corporations that are profiting off of our pain, they're operating everywhere. And so the farmers who are in the rural parts of our state are dealing with the rising cost of inputs from corporations, the billion-dollar corporations like Monsanto, right, which are making food prices higher for people here in Memphis and Shelby County who have access to a grocery store, but who might not because of food desert. And so it's really showing that they decided that this might divide us. And their divisionist politics of hate and racism and xenophobia would stop us from realizing, wait, we've actually got not just shared interests, but shared problems. And there's a shared solution in electing a congressman who actually listens to the people, is proximate to them, and fights the billionaires and the corporations and has a track record of doing so. And so I really did think they wanted to silence us, but instead they've awoken a sleeping giant.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at all the elections since November 24, we see an electorate on the Democratic side that is truly fired up, engaged. The party's been winning virtually every election, special election. The few that weren't won, we witnessed considerably shrunken margins. And I think finally the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates have the right message. So I agree totally that while this was probably the goal, I just see Democrats are not taking this anymore. The record turnout that we're seeing is indicative of what you're saying. And I do want to get to your campaign in a moment, but I have a couple more questions about the redistricting. So there's been a couple of legal challenges to the new map. They've suffered setbacks, but there are pending lawsuits, I believe, from the ACLU, NAACP, and the League of Women Voters. Where do those suits stand? And what's the strongest legal argument that's still being pursued?
Right. So the strongest legal argument, and we had a lawsuit initially, but realized the ACLUs and the NAACPs probably had the stronger grounds here. But we just had a hearing in court 2 days ago now. But the main thing is the maps are racist, and to use racism to draw a map is still unconstitutional. It's not just that the effect is ultimately disproportionately impacting Black people. Is that the intent of the state legislature was to draw racist maps that took away Black political power and our ability to elect a representative of our own choosing. And the arguments really stem from the history of abuses by the state of Tennessee to the people in Memphis and Shelby County, which is the Blackest city in the entire state. From my expulsion from the Tennessee House of Representatives for standing up against gun violence, to them taking over our school board district and creating their own board to oversee our school board, stripping us of our democratically elected representation, authority over our school system, to attacks on our district attorney that have just been endless by the Republican Party, and actively trying to strip him away of his autonomy and authority and give it to the Attorney General. We passed laws in the wake of the tragic death of Tyree Nichols, who was killed by police officers in Memphis, Tennessee, to stop pretextual traffic stops. And the state came back and preempted all of the laws that we passed. And so we're in a constant relationship where the state is stripping away local control, attacking Black political power and Black political autonomy when it comes to Memphis and Shelby County in particular. And this is another part of that litany. And you had representatives who were lying and saying things on one hand, like, oh, we didn't know it was a majority Black city. To on the other hand, saying, we only use census data to break up these districts. Right. But here's the thing. Census data doesn't have political affiliation. So you can't both say this was only based on political affiliation and say we only use census data. Because census data doesn't have political information, but you know what information it does have? The racial makeup of the people. And so they sort of have told on themselves over and over again that they broke this district up by race to give themselves an advantage. But the lawsuits that we have going forward are listing the litany of attacks by the state on our right to participate in democracy. And they've been heard by a 3-judge panel, and hopefully that continues to move forward. But simultaneously, we're still going to run the race because even if the maps don't change, we know we have a chance here.
How confident are you that the courts will successfully intervene
I,
before the
I,
midterms?
I don't feel that confident, to be honest with you. The courts have really, unfortunately, been captured by the Heritage Foundation and the Trump administration overwhelmingly, and they put in appointees that have no fidelity to the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the state of Tennessee, but really have a fidelity to this president and a political party. And the courts, unfortunately, have become one of the most partisan branches of government. And we see a few judges who are standing up against that and standing up to that. But a lot of these Trump appointees and similarly appointed people, they don't really care about the ideas of civil rights or equal justice under the law. They're operating more as political actors. And yet there are a few, right, who have stood up against the attacks on our democracy in Minnesota, against those elected officials. And there are some who are trying to retain the independence of the judiciary. But when billionaires are buying Supreme Court justices, RVs, it's really hard to believe that that type of ethic has not trickled down into our state level courts as well.
Yeah. When Barack Obama was elected president twice, there was a lot of talk about a post-racial America, that we finally got there. We, of course, know that that was a fantasy. But when you look at where we are today, 2026, are you shocked by the level of racism that still exists in our country today? Or do you feel like it was always there, always building, but maybe the simple answer is Donald Trump unleashed the beast, and now we see it out in the open?
Now we see it out in the open, I think, is probably more the truth. People think it's okay to be racist. People think it's okay to be sexist and misogynistic. People think it's okay to be bigoted and xenophobic because the President of the United States is sexist, misogynistic, xenophobic, and racist. And so they feel entitled to be able to do the exact same things. And during the President Obama era, there was at least a modicum of respect for other people that, you wouldn't call human beings illegal. There was a way that we would attempt to engage in civil discourse that just does not exist now with MAGA Republicans and with this president of the United States, who's just a hate-filled hate mongerer, because it allows for more distractibility and serves as a red herring so that you don't ever pay attention to the economic strangulation that's being created on behalf of billionaires and a trillionaire. You don't pay attention to the data centers that are taking your water, polluting your air, poisoning the soil because they want you over here fighting about, trans athletes. It's consistently a divisionist politics. So you look to your left and your right for the problem instead of looking up at the people who are actually in control and managing a system that is oppressing all of us. And if you are not a billionaire, I'm talking to you. You're one of us, right? Like that's what's going on. So I think he got unleashed, but you have to be, in retrospect, think about, where did the hate go that founded the Ku Klux Klan in Pulaski, Tennessee, 161 years ago, that lynched Black people in the United States of America, that led Ronald Reagan to put crack cocaine inside of Black communities? Where did that hate go at the bottom of lynching trees? And what has become more apparent to me, particularly in this moment, more acute, is that hate did not disappear. Mm-hmm. It dissipated into institutions. And so now those same people, instead of being at lynching trees, they are the governor who refuses to grant clemency to people who they know should be exonerated, like Tony Carruthers here in Tennessee. They become Supreme Court justices who got the most significant voting rights act legislation in American history. They become the speakers of the House, like Ku Klux Cameron here in Tennessee, right, who passed legislation to deprive Black people of their political power in 3 days with Rand McNally and Bill Lee. That hate dissipated. Mm-hmm. And the responsibility of people of good conscience and goodwill is to look at our situation and to say, how do we exorcise the demons of hatred and of evil that have become way too common in American society, which is going to require some intentional reflection, repentance, and reconciliation.
And leadership.
And leadership, which we have a dearth of right now. And that's honestly been on both sides of the political spectrum. We have to have leadership that is willing to say things that may be uncomfortable, stand up to people who may be, their friends, or stand up to the corporations right? And the billionaires who too often are funding both sides of the political spectrum, but we have to stand up to them on behalf of the last, the lost, the least of these, as Scripture says.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the KKK before. Unfortunately, the white hood has been replaced by the red baseball hat.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of having to go out into the middle of the woods in the middle of the night with your white hood, you can go into a restaurant with your red cap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where we are today.
That's so powerful. I had not thought about it that way. But I remember I was actually talking about politics at a restaurant, and a gentleman is just reminding me of that. A gentleman left, or he was sitting next to us. He left the restaurant, went to his car, came back with the red cap and slammed it on his table, right? Because we were talking about justice, we're talking about racism, we're talking about need for more economic opportunity, taxing billionaires and things. And that was his statement as a tool of intimidation, right? Because that's ultimately the idea with the KKK. It was burning crosses and things like that to intimidate you to not vote, to intimidate you to not talk about politics, to intimidate you to feel that you're an outsider in a country that you helped to found and to create. And so it is most definitely it's the new replacement, but there's been some social allowance of it. That's a really powerful idea I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, and just think of the words on that hat. Make America great again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about that. So let's talk about your campaign. The U.S. House of Representatives, not known for being a functioning governing body for a while now. It's certainly not a bastion of bipartisanship. Why did you decide to jump into that mess?
Yeah. No, I'm running for the U.S. Congress because I love my community. I love Tennessee. I'm a seventh generation Tennessean, and I believe that government has a responsibility to do more for everybody, not just serve the billionaires and trillionaires, not just serve the corporations, but to lift up working class people, folks who are striving to be in the middle class, our kids and our families. And I think Congress and the people who serve in it have a moral obligation or responsibility to build a fair economy for everybody, to pass health care for all and Medicare for all, to do something to end the gun violence epidemic, and to speak up to protect our land, our air, and our water from these data centers and from the people who are seeking to exploit our community. This is a critical time for our democracy. And I mean, we're in a point of crisis with an elected authoritarian and with the capitulation, honestly, of so many people in Congress, capitulation of the court, that we have to have some voices that aren't just crying out in the wilderness, but who are sitting in positions of power. We're going to fight for everyday working people and families and for the future that we deserve.
Your primary is August 6th. You're running against, I think at this point, 3 other Democrats, including State Senator London Lamar. What's your message to voters in these final weeks about why they should vote for you over your opponents?
Yeah. One, every time I get to talk to a voter, I feel so much gratitude. And I was just meeting with, a couple dozen veterans. And the reality is I'm going to fight for our community with all that I have. I take zero corporate PAC money because I'll never be bought. I listen to my constituents that have held more community town halls and gatherings than every elected official at the state and federal level combined over the last 3 years, because being a proximate representative is something that I have sought to do and will continue to do in Congress. But the main reason that I ask for people's support and to believe in our campaign actually isn't about me, it's about us. It is about a belief that the best days for our community must be ahead of us. And if we are to reach those, it is going to take having leadership and a leader who knows what it's like to fight the billionaires, who knows what it's like to build a coalition and community around shared ideals and principles, and who is unwavering in their commitment to justice and a better future for our country. We can't have Republicans and Democrats being paid off by billionaires and corporations and think that things are going to change. Because I hear from too many people, nothing changes no matter who's in office. That's what people really believe, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. And what I've shown them and what I've told them is it'll be different with me in office, because I don't go to serve anyone but you, my constituents. And this is a very critical time for our country. And we need everyone who has the right to vote to go and vote in the primary and also in the general election.
Yeah, I always say election day is the one day of the year where the janitor and the billionaire have the same power,
Yeah.
If only people really understood that. besides the obvious, like fighting for voting rights, which we talked about, and you touched upon briefly affordability, maybe you can expand on those. But also, what are some of the other issues that are most important to you and Tennesseans?
The issue that I've heard the most from people all across our counties is affordability, especially as it relates to housing.
Hmm.
Private equity firms are buying up our neighborhoods and pricing people out of being able to own a home. And then they're increasing the rents so that people who are working for $10 an hour are being stretched to the brink just to be able to have a roof over their head. And that has to stop. Private equity firms should not be buying up neighborhoods, and it should be illegal for them to do so, which is why we need to make sure we pass legislation like one that I supported of Senator Charlene Oliver here at the state level called Homes Over Hedge Funds. But we need that at the national level. We have to increase the minimum wage. Our minimum wage hasn't increased for nearly 20 years. And though people's productivity has increased, CEOs are making 200 times their median employee. The people who are working those jobs are seeing stagnant wages while costs are going up because we're in endless wars across the world. So we got to increase the minimum wage to $25 an hour, expand the amount of money that people get for Social Security. And I believe in a federal jobs guarantee. Artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and robotics is going to significantly continue to disrupt our economy. And the use cases that we have been provided overwhelmingly take away the jobs of people to the tune of tens of thousands at this point. But over the next 7 to 10 years, it'll be millions. And as a country, we need to guarantee people the dignity of work by ensuring everyone has a job. Just like FDR did after the Great Depression, we need to make sure people are employed, they have a sustained income, and also that the wages that they earn allow them the opportunity to have time with their families, help raise the kids, help have kids, own a home, and live the American dream that has been dwindling, I think, for so many people. And data centers continue to come up in the communities we're in. And now I represent significantly rural areas in addition to the urban areas. Elon Musk is illegally polluting the air that we breathe in Memphis and Shelby County and South Haven, Mississippi, with his data centers, with 59 gas turbines that are operating illegally against the Clean Air Act. And Trump's Department of Justice last week just asked the courts to allow them to illegally pollute the air that we breathe so that they can continue to use XAI and Grok to kill people in Iran, a war that he said was over, and also a war that shouldn't have started anyway because he said he obliterated all of the nuclear weapons 12 months ago. But they said now they need to be able to kill the people in my community with their pollution because it's so essential for the Iran war. But folks are worried about their water from the aquifer and the lakes being used for these computers. Fresh drinking water used for computers to replace their jobs. And that's an existential crisis that's happening all across our state that we have to address. And the last thing really is just doubling down on healthcare. We've lost 16 rural hospitals in the state of Tennessee. 16. People are literally dying on the way to the hospital, and we're the richest country in the world, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. With regard to housing, there was some significant breaking news today. There was a bipartisan bill that passed to help with the housing crisis, and Trump announced that it's canceled because he wants the Senate to pass his SAVE Act. So if voters don't sit back, and I'm including Republicans and independents in this, if they don't sit back and see a guy who really does not care about them because he's fighting for his election stealing bill, like maybe this is why Democrats keep winning elections. Maybe this is why his polling is in the toilet. Maybe this is why the Republican Party is petrified and trying everything they possibly can to influence and or steal this election. So when I hear him do things like that, there's a part of me that's like, wow, that sucks. And then there's another part of me, maybe even a bigger part of me that's like, you know what? We'll deal with this for another few months. Let him keep just being Donald Trump, because this is what's going to drive voters of all stripes to the polls. He doesn't care about the affordability. He calls it a hoax, a Democrat hoax, right?
Yeah. I mean, at some point, I think everyone has to realize that this is untenable and this is unconscionable, that legislation that has bipartisan support, which is a rarity in American politics.
Absolutely.
Over 300 people in the House, I think 380 people in the House of Representatives voted in support of this legislation. Similarly, like margins in the Senate. And the President of the United States says, I want the legislation that's going to make it harder for people to vote. that's going to make it nearly impossible for women to vote, the SAVE Act. I want that to be law first. And then I'll deal with one of the most significant social and economic crises that our country is facing. Like the ego and evil that it takes for the president of the United States to behave in this way is not just erratic, it's dangerous.
Well, he called that a national emergency. He didn't call the housing crisis a national emergency, but he called the need for the SAVE Act based on a national emergency.
Because it's it's his emergency. It's
Absolutely.
his national emergency because it's all about him.
Mm-hmm.
It has never been about the American people. It has never been about the state of our country. It's always been about Donald Trump and what benefits him, what's going to make him happy, what's going to make him look good, what's going to make him feel good. Like he has created the presidency to serve himself. He's become more of a billionaire. I think over 1.5 billion, he's earned $1.5 billion since he's been in the White House. His children are getting governmental contracts. His corruption is in plain sight. He does not care about working people. He does not care about the American people. And even during the Iran war, he said, you know what? I don't think about people's pocketbooks when I think about the war that I'm in. But you know whose pocketbooks he does think about? He thinks about the military congressional industrial complex's pockets, who got $1 billion a day to make more bombs, to do more killing. He thought about their pockets, but he's not thinking about regular, everyday working people. And I do think Republicans, Democrats, independents, which most people are, they're looking at this and they're saying, this should not be the way that things are. And we all know how rare bipartisanship is. And so to see bipartisanship happen on what is a national emergency and a national crisis, and have the president of the United States say, you know what, I don't care about you all. I don't care about your housing. I don't care about affordability. I don't care about any of those things. I care about my things. I think ultimately people are going to go to the ballot box and say, that's not how a president should behave. That is who the Republican Party has become. And that's not something I want to be a part of anymore.
Yeah. Well, CNN earlier reported that they were talking to a top aide to a very senior Republican senator, and the aide off the record said, I've never in my career seen a president work so hard to undermine his party just several months from a major, perhaps the most important election in our lifetime, and one which could severely impact him as well. You know, but you're 100% right. He's a malignant narcissist and everything is about him. I actually think, according to some reports, the grifting totals about $4.5 billion. But even at 1.5 billion, it's still a lot. You yourself are 31 years old. You're a pretty young dude. Many young voters express frustration that their voices don't matter because of gerrymandered districts like we're talking about, as well as political polarization. What would you say to young voters who feel disengaged from the electoral process, and how can we make sure that we get them to the polls this November?
Yeah, one, I think for people who are disaffected, we first need to come in with some understanding and empathy. At least for the last 10 years, we have seen government being sabotaged by Republicans, or sought to be sabotaged by Republicans in the House, the Senate, or the presidency, turn after turn after turn, even when Democrats were in control. And too often the system is failing, right? It is still hard to live in the United States of America. We're having children later because we can't afford them. People who went to college and had the privilege to do so are dealing with mountains of debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. That's going to be nearly insurmountable to overcome, and are unemployed at similar rates to people who went to high school. So we just have to be honest that life is extremely hard for young people who don't have necessarily an American dream that they're looking forward to. It's more of an American nightmare. And what we are living in right now is a nightmare. And so to try and say, hey, have some hope through it all isn't really, people didn't grow up with President Obama, right? They grew up with Donald Trump as their president. So there's the hope and change isn't something that resonates. And we tried 2020, you get all the marching and the protesting as part of the movement for Black Lives, and then you get an entire political backlash, right? And so companies, corporations, law firms, they all capitulate, they quit. They say, you know what, never mind. That pluralistic American society that we were trying to build, we don't want that anymore. So I think we need to have some empathy about the reality of where we are. But then what I've encouraged a lot of my peers with is just a simple question: who makes better choices for your life, you or somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And well, they say me. And I think that's what voting's about. It's about you making the best choice for your life and for your future.
So we talked about racism before being out in the open. What's also out in the open right now is Trump and the Republican Party's attempts, with the help of courts, Supreme Court, to steal this election. This includes the demanding of states' voter records, attacks on mail-in voting, the SAVE Act, which I mentioned before, threats to deploy ICE agents to polling sites on Election Day. How concerned about all of this are you? And are you confident we're actually going to have a free and fair election in 5 months?
Look, I'm going to be honest. We all need to vote early and not wait till election day. And we need more people than ever before to be volunteering to work as poll workers and poll watchers, because I do believe there will be a lot of nefarious activity happening across the country, particularly in districts that are swing districts as well, which is why we are inviting and have asked a lot of people to come to Tennessee to be poll watchers, to be part of our campaign, because in some of these areas, we are deeply concerned that there's going to be some manipulation that is cause for concern. We've even heard cases previously where you had husbands and wives going in, and husbands are watching what buttons their wives are pushing to make sure that they vote a particular way. That type of voter suppression and voter intimidation is real in this country. And the only way to check that is to make sure that we have people who are literally there watching to prevent it from happening and to report it when it does. But the only way that we have a fair and free election is if people of good conscience and goodwill raise their hand and say, you know what, I'm going to work the polls. I'm going to be there. I'm going to watch. I'm going to participate to make sure that people feel comfortable going into the ballot box. Because this time around, I do think the ICE activity, the federal agents, and all those things are going to be a part of what we're going to experience. And we got to have some people that are being like, don't be afraid. Make sure you cast your ballot, because we've seen this before, quite literally, in our country.
Yeah, my last question has to do with yesterday's primaries. We saw like a pretty interesting phenomenon. Unfortunately, I think the media is only talking about, for the most part, one side of it. In New York, obviously, there was a hat trick for Mayor Mamdani. The three candidates, the Democratic Socialists that he supported, won. But then we also saw moderates win in like New York 17 with Kay Conley, Utah, South Carolina. All three of them are veterans or former military or intelligence officials. So there seems to be this push and pull within the Democratic Party, like a family that has some infighting, trying to figure out whether it wants to be more mainstream or whether the pendulum is swinging so far to the left, which might make sense on some level because the pendulum has swung so far to the right, and maybe it has to go really far to the left. Where do you stand on this? What did you make of what happened yesterday? Do you see this as some big national trend? Because you know the Republicans they're already eating this up and painting the party as like left-wing communist, socialist, capitalism-hating lunatics. But talk about that a little bit and what happened in New York versus what might be happening elsewhere in the country.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm excited to see all these Democratic wins, to be honest with you. A couple of my good friends won in New York, Claire and Daria Lisa. And so I'm excited for them and for the perspective that they're going to bring to our country. I think a couple of things here. The Democratic Party has to be a big tent party. We see what a small tent gets you, and it gets you ultimately a white supremacist lunatic as president of the United States, which we don't want. We want to have somebody who understands the big tent ideology and perspective, which is you can be a Democrat who is a part of DSA. You can be a Democrat who is a veteran, who may be a little bit more conservative, but we're all Democrats. And based on where you are, know that there is a place and there's room for you. Simultaneously, there has to be some things that separate us from the Republican Party. Being a moderate Democrat can't mean you're Republican light. That isn't going to work, because we have to be a party that says no to corporations ruling us, no to billionaires and trillionaires making more profit while the working class people are being strangulated by the same economic system that is making folks richer and richer. We have to say no to taking money from private equity firms that are buying up our neighborhoods and making it harder for people to live. And we have to say no to the big insurance and pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies who don't actually want us to have Medicare for all. we do need to have some principles. And what I think voters are responding to are elected officials in their communities who stand for something. Because everybody's pretty tired of having unprincipled leaders who, based on the way that the wind is blowing, their perspective changes, their ideas changes. They say, I'm against the Iran war and what Israel's doing. And then you look at their stocks that they're trading while being a member of Congress, and you see that they have money in Boeing, right? Like, we're tired of that. I think folks want principled and honest leadership. And so based on the community, that's going to look different. But I do believe what is happening with Democrats isn't necessarily infighting. It's us really chiseling away to define who we are, because we can't just be the anti-Trump party. Right? We got to be the few people who fight for the working class. We got to be the people who stand up for the little guy, the small business owner, the small farmer. We've got to be the party of people, of the people. And I think that is antithetical to a group of folks who are the party of the billionaires and the trillionaire class. And so everybody else should be Democrats.
Yeah, I personally think, having a big tent is really important. And I feel like that's what's energized everyone from Gen Z to seniors in the party, unlike the Republican Party, which marches in lockstep with its cult leader. I wish that was the media narrative, that the Democrats have been winning, the Democrats are fired up, the Democrats are engaged because they're able to run a spectrum of ideas and opinions. Whether or not any of us agrees with everything on one side or the other doesn't matter. It's that there's room for everybody. And if everybody votes, guess what? We win, right?
We win. Literally. If everybody votes, we win. That's why they don't want everybody to vote.
Exactly.
It's very clear.
Exactly.
They are terrified of everybody voting, because if everybody voted, Democrats would win, because we have a better message that speaks to the direct needs of people. And that's what we have to make sure we hold on to. We cannot become Republican light. We cannot take their playbook. The playbook's been burned, shredded, and thrown into the Atlantic Ocean. What we have to do is create a new vision for this country, a new American dream for this country that is inclusive of everybody, regardless of faith, religion, identity. The politics of the past is a recognition that, yes, this tent is big enough, and the pillars of it are things that help everybody.
So if folks want to learn about the campaign and donate and support, where do they go?
Yes, go to votejustinj.com. You can sign up. Make sure you get our newsletter, a volunteer. We got phone banking. If you want to come down to Tennessee, we got canvassing as well. But go to votejustinj.com. I appreciate all of the support.
Representative, thanks for coming on. Do come back and chat with us again soon.
I'd be happy to. I thank you so much, my friend. Keep the faith, keep the fight.
Likewise. Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.